right, welcome everyone, welcome family, welcome to another Del Toro live stream. Um, Today we are still discussing the topic of mental health, and I'm proud to introduce Miss Bronwyn Kili, who has kindly agreed to join us for our live stream today. Um, Welcome, Bronwyn, and very nice to meet you today.
I'm happy to be here. Well, it's wonderful to finally meet you, and I'm so happy to be part of your live stream.
Thank you for coming and agreeing to join us. Bronwyn's background is she's a youth ambassador with the UNFP, but
Young
yeah,
ambassador.
sorry,
Not
young
youth.
ambassador. Sorry,
Yes.
and so she has a lot to. Well, I should probably give you the mic and get you to properly introduce what you do, Bronwyn. If you can just sort of give us a sort of an intro into what you do and what you sort of plans for the future and that type of thing.
Okay. Well, I am okay. Yes, I am the young ambassador of the UNFP, but I've been working in the GBV and advocacy space since I was 15. So I'm 25 now, so it's been 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So as young ambassador, I work across all of UNFP's projects, ensuring that if there are opportunities or gaps where we can mainstream youth projects or support for young people, especially on sexual and reproductive health, that we can do that. My role also includes advocating for youth-friendly services, for platforms for youth participation, for capacity building for young people, for support, and for the needs of young people to be addressed, especially with regards to youth and adolescent health or sexual and reproductive health. And of course, that includes having discussions on mental health, mental health, yes, personal development of young people and their well-being.
Okay.
So
okay,
a whole bunch of stuff, mouthful.
Yes,
But
yes.
that's what I do. That's my job. But yes, of course, my background has been working with different youth groups. I work with communities. I work with schools, governments. Yeah, these are our government departments. These are the different. I work with people from different sectors on each of these different issues. Yes.
And so,
workers, yeah.
can I ask, when you were growing up, was this something you sort of strived for, or you just kind of fell into it, or how did you sort of get into this field?
Well, I actually wanted to be a neurosurgeon when I was like a little girl. Yes, I did. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And so it just kind of like changed course along the way. Like I wanted to be a neurosurgeon because I wanted to do, like if people ask me like, what do you want to do? I want to create change, naively I just said that. I wasn't very clear on the kind of change that I wanted within my community, or the kind of change that I wanted to contribute to, which is very important. But as a young person, as a child, I just wanted to I'm like, okay, I want to contribute. And I think it was because my mother, as a journalist, she worked with so many different people, especially women, who were doing stuff on HIV and AIDS, who were talking about GBV, who were working, in different spaces, doing community work, doing things in their own way with their limited resources to contribute to the development of the country, or to contribute to their communities in small ways. So I grew up watching that. She would come home and she would tell me stories about all these amazing women, and one of them that I absolutely love is Tessie Soy, who works at the Family Support Center at Jen. Yes, and she worked with orphans, of kids who were orphaned because of HIV and AIDS, and she's done some amazing work. She's she's a real queen. So she was one of the first people that I was interested. She was my role model. Yeah.
Right. What was her name again? Sorry to cut you off.
Tessie Soy.
Tessie Soy. Okay, I'm gonna remember that name.
Yes.
She sounds like a very interesting person.
She is. You should actually have her on the live stream, especially on this.
Yeah.
But because of women like her, I just started to develop an interest in this. But of course, I also wanted to be a neurosurgeon. But when I was 15, that's when things started to change. I guess you hit puberty, and some of the things that happen
Mm.
to you as a child that don't affect you, they start to affect you
Right. Right.
in like, your teen years. And so I guess for me, that's when it started. I had my first what do I say, mental health struggle at that
Right.
time.
Okay.
Like I was not necessarily like I was a bit depressed and kind of like couldn't focus on a lot of things. But like I said, a lot of things that happened to me as a child started to catch up and just affect me in that particular stage. So that was the first time I actually went for counseling.
All right. Okay.
Because my mother put me to counseling, and that was because I came close to like being suicidal
Mhm.
at the time. So she sent me to counseling, and it also because around that time it also affected my studies. I became someone who was very focused on school, someone who just couldn't focus anymore, and my teachers picked that up. So I had two people that I went to counseling with. One was a counselor in school. She was one of our math teachers. So she would take me to her like room office, and she would have conversations with me every week and
And
try
this
to
was
do a
in
counseling
Port
session.
Moresby.
Yes, this was in
Okay.
my primary school,
Okay.
and I was in eighth grade, actually
Okay.
grade eight at the time. Yeah. So she would take me and she would do like counseling sessions with me. Um, and initially, like I wasn't her biggest fan. Like for some reason, like she wasn't a teacher that I wasn't her biggest fan. Like I didn't really like her. But when she became like
Wait, you weren't a fan of her, or she wasn't a fan of you?
I wasn't a fan of her. Like I
Okay.
was I wasn't a fan of her, and but I have like she had so much impact on my life at that time because I was going off track, and she kind of like she was the one that was patient and she was willing to listen,
Right. Right.
and she was the only one that kind of pulled out like the things that I couldn't speak about. And also my mom also sent me to someone who was like she was I think she was a psychiatrist,
Mm-hmm.
just to talk to. But it wasn't a very like serious issue. But I was at a point where I just didn't know how to deal with all these things that were happening to me that actually affected me.
Mm.
And I guess as a child, sometimes it doesn't really affect you at the early stages, but when you start hitting your teens and you start to learn and realize certain things, that's when it started to affect me.
Yeah. Mm.
So it was at the time when I like started to okay, I have to try this, but I was also like quite suicidal at the time. So I did that, and then that counselor teacher, she kind of got me through my grade 8 exam, and I passed. And while I was waiting for results, I joined a club called the Youth Adolescent Health Club.
Okay.
And yeah, and in that club we talked about like they would do peer education training. So they train you so that you can train or teach other people information about sexual and reproductive health,
Wow. Okay.
about HIV and AIDS, yeah, about even like mental health, like some bits on how you could consult someone if you wanted to, not as a like complete expert, but
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
on things
Kind
like,
of
and then you learn like
try to give you the
yeah,
tools, some tools
yes,
to deal
yes,
with
because
guiding others,
and
maybe. Yeah.
the and because like things um, like things like life skills like critical thinking, creative thinking, decision making, family planning, all these different like topics, and also like the reproductive health system, how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of stuff about STIs, about yeah, sex,
Mm. Mm.
things that you won't, yeah, and all these topics are like very sensitive,
Yeah. Mm.
including mental health. And if you ask a young person, like if you ask a teenager, like who's the first person you would go to if you wanted information on any of these things, they would say my best friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, what happens is that in a lot of cases, and this happens like outside Port Moresby, especially like in rural like provinces,
Mm.
you people go to their best friend and they get information that's not accurate,
Right.
and and that's very risky and that's very dangerous. And so the concept of this was that you would learn this information so that so that you could share with your peers in your own language. Like we always say, like, oh,
Mm.
so that was the whole like concept of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I joined that, and that's how I kind of got into all of this work. And I
Yeah.
joined
Yeah.
like one youth organization and NGO after another, and I was just doing that, and keeping myself busy. And for me, all this work was at the first time when I joined it, like I thought, okay, I just want to make a difference. But later on, as I hit my 20s, I realized that every single thing that I advocated for was something that affected me personally in some way. So in a way, I was like, yeah, I was like not necessarily motivated just to create change, but I was like, now when people ask me like what motivates you to do what you do, it's fear. It
Right.
was
Okay.
it was yeah, I would say it was fear. Like when you're younger, it's like, oh yeah, I want to create change. I want to contribute to change. But now when it's like the first thing that comes to mind is fear. And it's
Mm,
the fear of all these things that happening again, you know.
right. Right.
So yes, you talk about physical abuse, you talk about sexual abuse. These are things that I experienced when I was growing up. And
Sorry to
so
hear that.
it's yeah. So I mean, it's easier to talk about now,
Mm,
but even as an advocate, I couldn't even say that before because I never spoke about it.
yeah.
And so when people would ask me, like, why do you advocate? I just want to create change, but it was never really, I'm scared. Like, I'm terrified that history would repeat itself or that I would be in a position where it would hurt me somehow, even if it wasn't directly, that it would happen to someone I love, like
Mm,
my daughter or, like my sister.
yeah.
And I just never wanted to be in that position again. And the way these things affected me, it affected not just me, like it didn't just happen to me, it happened to my sister and it happened to my mother. And so like yeah, it was just all of that stuff. But I think indirectly I was doing that because in my heart I just never wanted that to happen again.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's one thing I learned, is that even as an advocate, I couldn't talk about it at first. I could help other people and like deal with it, but I also couldn't talk about mine. But it did come out in its own way. Yeah, it did come out. And I think I'm a better advocate for being able to acknowledge that this is also my story. Yeah.
mm. And yeah, that's a very strong story because you turned something that was kind of negative for you into something actually positive and that you can
Yeah.
use to help others. So I think
Yeah.
that's very, very powerful that you have that story. And when you go to others, um, it you're speaking from a place that's real,
Yeah.
and so they can relate to you better. I think, which is easier than if someone that didn't experience those things, trying to
Yeah.
tell someone, you can do this, and yours carries more weight and you have more strength in what you're trying to tell someone or guide someone to get through a certain situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for uh, telling us that story of how you got into all started off where you are now.
Mm.
Um, welcome to, by the way, welcome to the chat, Kenas and Cassie. Thank you very much. Cassie said, "Indeed," when she was listening uh, to what you had to say. So thank you, Cassie. Um, so I wanted to see, like, for me, when I was growing up, I did some schooling in Port Moresby as well. I grew up in Port Moresby. For me, I never had heard of any like counseling and all the access to
Yeah.
counselors or anything. So I think that's very good that you had that teacher that sort of stepped up and said, come with me and I'll and then interesting that you didn't really get along with her or you didn't really like her as you said, but
Yeah.
that in actual fact she had something to give, something to provide, and she helped you on that journey.
Yeah.
So it's it's very promising that I hear that there's that available for kids in PNG, which was my fear
Yeah.
that,
I think.
that there wasn't a
Yeah.
lot. But I from what you're saying, I think there is a system
I think
there or
it's.
counselors, as you say.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, I think like, that is my story and I was privileged to have her, but not many people have that.
mm,
Um, I have to say I was privileged to have that, like, I mean, sometimes I'm like, what are the odds that I would find a teacher who would be able to help me like her? And there are a lot of, I think for kids, there are so many, like in every school, there is this one teacher, you know,
mm,
that's there and that has the patience to go beyond the call of duty, because we know we all a lot of our teachers are underpaid, not in some cases not even paid,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
on time, or can't even get the entitlements, that kind of stuff. We don't really look after our teachers well, but I think my teachers had a huge impact on my life as well, especially because like kids spend more time at school than they do at home, because you go and you spend like the day part, and you go home, yes, you spend like the afternoon at home, but and then you sleep and then you go back, and it's a whole routine, so your teachers see you more. And for me, it was teachers like her who paid attention and who recognized that like, okay, yeah, this girl, she does well in these subjects, but she's dropped, there's obviously something, so they started asking questions because they noticed a change in behavior. And in a lot of cases, you can't recognize that because classrooms are overcrowded. How are you going to pay
Yeah,
attention to
yeah.
one kid,
So
you
many
know?
kids, yeah.
Yeah, so the race when the
How did they
ratio of
pick up on
students,
just your situation
yeah,
from all of all the
exactly.
kids? Mm.
Yeah. And like the ratio for student to teacher is just like not even balanced. Like it's just off.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really hard for educators to be able to pick things up like that. But at the same time, we don't have, like, we do have I know at PomGen we do have
Yeah.
like those services, but not many people know about them, and in some cases young people don't find them accessible,
Mm.
find these services accessible. But I have to say, like, I know like I've heard from a few friends at PomGen does like has really great services. So to like the psychiatric ward, like they have really good services. I've heard from a
Mm-hmm.
couple of friends, and so I know that's one place to check out, but I'm not an expert because I haven't really tried out the services there yet,
Yeah,
but I hear
yeah.
they're really good. And one thing you'll notice is that, despite how under-resourced some of our public hospitals are, the health workers and the doctors there, they do the best that they can. And some of this, and
With
the
what they
quality
have.
of,
Mm.
yeah, with what they have.
Mm.
But it is a big problem in PNG that we don't talk about mental health enough, and that we don't have enough investment in this particular area. And I think it also shows in the kind of things that we're seeing today. Sometimes we see the kinds of like the acts of violence, the
Mm.
inhumane treatment of our own, women and young people in this country. And you're like, why is this happening? And like, I personally believe that it's also linked to trauma.
Mm.
I think sometimes that in some ways, I think that we have like a lot, like so many people who are traumatized by what they see, because violence is something that we see in our communities as we're growing up. So even if it doesn't happen in your home, it's something that you witness somewhere. And if you're in an environment where you constantly see this and it's constantly treated as a norm,
Mm.
it's
It's
going
going
to
to
mess with
affect you.
you.
Yeah,
Yes,
you're
it's
gonna be
going to mess
affected.
with you.
Mm. Especially
Exactly.
the younger you are, the young kids that
Absolutely.
witness those
Because
things.
imagine the feeling of watching something happen. Like, I'll say for children, like, I'll give you an example. Recently we had this the athlete that was beaten up with the iron. That video that went viral, that was something that was difficult to watch.
Oh yes,
I,
yes, yeah.
I know a lot of people who looked at it and they're like, oh, I can't look. Every time you share it on Facebook, it will always give you that warning that this is something that is very sensitive content. Like, be careful. Like, watch at your own risk or whatnot.
Yeah, yeah.
But the reality here in PNG is that in communities and in homes, kids see that every day. They see
Mm.
that, they look at that. They look at what we look at in a video and we can't look at. Like, we just can't look at because it affects us. And any that small, like, what, 10, like, I don't know how many, like 1 minute video or whatnot, when you watch it, it affects you. But imagine having to look at that
Yeah.
constantly, like every week,
Mm.
or every day, to have to see something like that. If you think that's not going to mess someone up, that is going to affect someone in
Yeah,
some way.
yeah, yeah.
And it may not be obvious because we all have different ways of dealing with such like that, things like that, but these things come out if you
Yeah,
don't deal
yeah,
with them.
yeah.
And either when they affect you directly or not. Like, for my case, when I had the experiences that I had, like, I never really dealt with them even as an advocate. But they came out in the form of, anxiety attacks, in
Right.
the form of, these kinds of things that would happen. And eventually I had no choice but to have to talk about them and have to sit with a counselor and say, look, this happened to me, and actually acknowledge it. And I remember someone coming to me and saying, like, why don't you want to talk about it? And I said, because I want to protect the people that I
Those
love. Like, I
involved.
didn't,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah. Like, for me, it was, I didn't, like, I had a single mother. And so I didn't want to save that to my single mother who worked so hard to protect me and to raise me. Like, for me, it was like, if I told her that, it was like, I felt like she would feel back that she wasn't able to protect me.
Mm.
And, that's not her fault, and for me, it was kind of like, I just wanted to protect her and, people that I loved from the knowledge of this happening. But then this person told me, if you don't, like, if you protect people, like, who's protecting you?
Right. Right.
And I said, like, if you're going to tell young people that they need to, if they need help, if these things happen, that they need to talk about it, they need to seek help, or they need to seek counseling about it, why, like, you can't tell them to do that if you're not going to do that for yourself. And like, you have to walk the talk, and you need to be the person or the adult or the person that that little girl who went through that needed. And for me, it was like, I was four at the time, I think around 4. And so he was saying to me, like, you need to be the person that that 4-year-old needed, the same way you would protect a young person now was from something like that, because I've assisted with a couple of cases over the years. It's like, the same way you need to do that for yourself. Because, and I think for a lot of people, like, we don't reach out for help because of stigma, or because that we can't find, like, it's really like I said, it's inaccessible. But if you find a way, you need to be able to deal with these things, even if it happened to you as a child. Because if you don't, it's going to resurface in some way. It will still come out, and it will still affect you in your adult life. And so for me, I'm happy that I had that. But, like, you have services like One Talk Counseling Line, which you can call, and that's, I understand, there's a free
That's a
call.
hotline. Is it?
Yes, that is a hotline.
Okay. Oh, good.
Yes. You have like One Talk Counseling Line. You have, like, in schools, sometimes you have a counselor and a chaplain, but it's in this country, we still have a long way to go. We still need services, like, even if they exist. The other challenge is, if young people feel comfortable enough to go and access those services, if is it youth friendly, or do you feel like you're going to be judged if you go there, that kind of thing. But it's a conversation that we must have, and it is important to constantly be checking on each other and checking on our friends, because in a place where these services don't exist, we have to rely on our community. And if our community is not paying attention to these things, it's not there, whether it is your teachers or your family or your best friend, if we're not being able, if you don't create safe spaces where people can come and have those conversations, then we won't really make much progress. Because we have to, before these services even come into place, we need to make it okay to talk about mental health,
Accessible.
okay
Yeah.
to talk about depression. And once we work that culture, these services come, people will go and access these services. But if we don't have that culture already, even if we provided the services, what is the guarantee that people will actually still go and get them?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Good point.
that kind of stuff.
Like, that's funny that you say that, because yesterday I spoke with a PNG streamer who went through some. His name's Winter Soul, by the way. He went through some anxiety issues, and a lot of what he was talking about was that there was a big stigma around mental health, and for young people to sort of address the issues when
Yeah.
there's this there's still our culture is still very much closed and not open to discussion
Yeah.
on mental health.
No, it is.
So it is a very, I think, scary subject for some, and definitely the way forward is make, if these systems are already in place, making them more accessible and more easy for young people to access. Because I can just imagine, if I'm a young person trying to walk up into the hospital with a problem, the hospital looks kind of scary to me, to be honest. Like, you hear a lot of stuff about hospitals and things like that. So
Yes.
I think that's something that could be improved, just
Yeah.
to make it more appealing for people to go somewhere that's not as
Yeah.
scary looking, or something
Yeah.
they could be willing to try.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
No, that
mm,
definitely, yeah. We have to create safe spaces, otherwise people won't go. And also the confidentiality part of it is like, are
mm.
people gonna go and talk about what I tell them?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah. So
yeah,
Kenas, in the chat, he has said, watching it in real life, and they think it's normal. So I think he was talking about, as the children
the
were,
violence.
yes, viewing the
Yes,
violence.
yeah,
They tend to start to think that it's normal after
yeah.
some time.
No,
Um,
absolutely, yeah,
yeah. So I think a lot of it can get hidden as well, and like, people tend to build over it or something. So I think unraveling it, as you did with the person you spoke to, was a good way to deal with those issues. Sometimes you probably won't even think it's there until something else
happens.
happens, and
Yeah,
yeah, it just triggers those emotions to come out, or something that's been hidden away.
yeah. I would say like if you find yourself like if you find you're having certain emotional reactions that you don't like understand, sometimes even just speaking with a counselor or therapist, or whichever like person, like
Yeah,
speaking
yeah,
with someone and who can help you actually trace back, um, you will find out of more about yourself that you don't realize.
mm.
And I think one way to also even manage your mental health is to do frequent like reflections. I found this to be very helpful. And every year I do them. Sometimes you need to be able to have your own time. Like you have time that you spend with other people, but you also have your own time of
Yeah,
reflection yourself. Some people do it as part of their
meditation.
prayers,
Yeah,
meditation, but it's, yeah, just for you to just really like look at yourself and assess the things that you do and the things that influence the things that you do and the people around you and the kind
mm,
of yeah, like energy that people give off
mm.
for you. And are you in a supportive environment, or are you in one that makes you feel less and less about yourself? Like these kinds of different things that you just assess. And sometimes in the process of reflecting or writing, even if you can't speak it, you can write. I find that very
Oh yeah, yeah.
helpful for myself. Yeah. And you learn a lot about yourself. So a lot of things to it, like mental health, is also about you being aware of yourself and your
Self
actions and
awareness.
your
Yeah.
emotions. Yeah. And why you're doing the things you do, because sometimes they link back to things that you never resolved as a
Mm,
young person, as a child growing up.
yeah. And things start to make sense once you start doing it. You're like, okay, this all
Yeah.
makes sense now. Why I'm doing this? So yeah,
It does. It
and
does. It really, really does.
yeah, definitely. So Josh in the chat, he's got a comment here. He says, "We've seen so much violence, we've become desensitized to it. It's
Yeah.
come to a point where we see extremely messed up stuff, and we know
Yeah.
that it's wrong, but we just chalk it up to MPNG. What can we do
Yeah.
about it?" That is true,
That's the
Josh.
thing. Yeah.
Mm. We have
That's how
become
you make things.
desensitized.
That's
Yeah.
how you. Yeah. No, I mean that's how you make things normal. I think one of the most common way we make things normal is like every time something happens, we're like, gosh, typical PNG, you know.
Mm.
And typical is just another way for normal.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think as bystanders and as individuals, we've some of these things we've learned, which means we need to unlearn it. Like I always say this, like you learn and you unlearn
Yeah.
as well. And I think some like certain ways that we communicate and do things, by reflecting on ourselves, it also helps us to see if there's certain practices that we have that we need to unlearn. Like I'll give you an example. Like for me, one of the things that I used to have very like poor communication skills. or like aggressive, like defensive, like
Oh,
kind
okay.
of communication. Even yeah, I used to have that. And this was something that someone picked up, like when I was in high school, and said like, "Why? What's wrong?" Like I think it was just I just had so much anger, so it would come off in like so many ways. Like I was just bitter.
Oh, it
So
came off like that, but you weren't really
yeah,
intending it to.
it came off. Yeah, like it came off like that. I think I was just like I would be very defensive
Mm-hmm.
emotionally. And it came from being in a place where like I guess I never really felt protected, and so I always felt like I needed to protect myself. So it
Mm.
just came from that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
but I didn't realize that in I didn't realize that what happened now is that sometimes people would like say things and they weren't attacking me, but I would like fight back.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I would just lash out, and like not in a good way, like I would lash out so bad. And I remember one of my closest friends, like he just came to me and he's like, "Yo, like I just like can I just say something?" He's like, "Sometimes like we're not trying to attack you. Like it's like there are times when I mess with you, like and I really am messing with you, but there are times when I'm just trying to like I'm just having a conflict. Like I'm not lashing out, like trying to attack you, you know."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why are you so defensive? Like he said that. And I looked at him and I was like, what do you mean? And I thought about how I reacted to him, and in a couple of instances, and I realized that I was just in fight or flight mode all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, but I wasn't aware that I was doing this. But that's the thing, like I learned how to communicate in like screaming matches because that's what I witnessed a lot,
Mm-hmm.
or with aggression. And it's something that I had to work on, all the
Yeah.
time. And so now, the things that would really tick me off like easily before, like they don't as much. But this is the thing why I keep saying self-awareness is very
Yeah.
important,
Yeah. Definitely.
because like you said, like these things happened as you're growing up as a child, you witness violence, you witness all these things, and you need to be able to differentiate between what is wrong and what is normal. And we know, we self God, like we know what is wrong and what is normal, but we don't acknowledge it enough. And sometimes, like they said, we've seen it so much, just desensitized by it. But sometimes when we reflect on our actions, it helps us to realize, okay, these things happen and that what influences this and that, and we connect the dots. So mental health is as much our responsibility as it is a counselor counseling us. It's
Mm-hmm.
also us reflecting on ourselves, and reflecting and doing these things, or asking yourself, the having conversations with yourself that are like hard. Like there's
Mm.
some truths that you don't want to discuss with yourself, but so you'll avoid, distract yourself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like the generation that we love distraction. We have to
Distraction
be on our
generation.
phones. Yes, I always say like so like sometimes you're like you can't sit alone and just sit with yourself,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's scary to sit with yourself when you know that there are truths that you just don't want to acknowledge or face. But by being able to do that, and I'm not saying you can do that every single time, but if you find a moment, do
Mm.
that and have the tough conversations, because then you will
Away
learn
from
how to listen,
technology, away from
away
screens.
from
Just
away from the screens,
yeah.
away from the technology. Just like sit with yourself
Yeah.
and just figure yourself out. Some of these answers just lie with us digging back. But
Mm.
yeah, it's important to look at that, because like we said, so many of these things have affected us as we're growing up, and so now we have to try to unlearn them, and we
Mm.
can't if we don't go back, reflect, and acknowledge that yes, this influences why I do this and that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not, it's easier said than done,
Oh,
but
definitely, definitely.
yeah, easier said than done, but worth trying. you know we should always be trying and learning.
Yeah. Yeah. In the end, it's more beneficial if you can self-assess and
Yeah,
identify the
it's
issues
it's fun.
yourself, other than
Yeah,
someone else telling you. It wouldn't make that well when you think about it, it doesn't make sense. Like you can
yeah,
hear everything from a counselor and do everything
yeah,
they tell you to do, but in the end, it's you that have you've got to put in the hard work, the hard yards to make it more of a difference. And
yeah.
yeah.
And the counselor's job is to sort of like, they advise you and all that, but they
Mm.
can't make the tough decisions about your life,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you have to do that. I've had think I've seen a couple of counselors from time to time. Sometimes because the work we do also is not always, like it's sometimes it has stress. We have to de-stress. We have to go and talk about some of the horrific things we see. So I've seen different counselors, and from what I've from my experience, they help guide you. They
Yeah.
they
Mm.
they help guide you to reflect and to find things, and a lot of the answers lie with you.
Mhm.
But it's helpful to go and have that conversation and that outlet, and then have someone be able to teach you to look at like a different lens, because sometimes when you look at things from like just close up, you can't see it. But having that counselor is there. So regardless, counselors is still, if you have the opportunity to talk to someone or to see a counselor, to see a therapist, take it. But also remember that a lot of a lot of this healing process takes time, and it's partially you reflecting on yourself
Mhm.
and having the tough conversations and taking action as well.
Yeah.
It takes time sometimes, but when you're done, it's
You're
totally
better
worth
off.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're better off.
Josh is agreed with us as well. He said, yes, you can't get better if you don't try to help yourself. So just definitely, Josh, we agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. Interesting stuff that you've really brought up, Bronwyn. Especially that there's more help out there. We just have to find it,
Yeah.
and hopefully, uh, the ways where young people have access to that and are aware of it, first of all, improves for Papua New Guineans and also people abroad, because we do have. Actually, when I was doing sort of polls and little questionnaires on my social media, uh, a lot of people were opening up about the issues and telling me to keep this confidential and things like that,
Yeah.
and not only from Papua New Guinea, from other countries as well. So it is definitely a global issue, I think, and
Yeah.
due to things like the pandemic and things like that, those
Yeah.
issues are on the rise.
Well, definitely. I mean, during the pandemic, it was reported that cases of GBV abuse, they increased because for a lot of people, their abuser is not some stranger; it's someone who's known to them or within their home. So people are stuck with their abuser, or
Right.
people are stressed out. People are stressed out because of the pressures that the pandemic has brought. Economic wise and all.
Even
So
more
yeah,
added
definitely
pressures.
has
Mm.
more added pressures. Yeah, it has been tough, and I mean, in terms of response or services, we already have challenges. It's they're already challenged. So this just adds extra pressure. One thing that we talked about during COVID, I remember we were doing some awareness on this, but we were saying, during times of lockdown, during times of crisis, remember to call your friends and check on them. Are you well? Keep connected. You have ways to keep connected, but just keep checking on people.
Mm. Mm.
Because during these times, of course, it has affected. But coming back to what you were saying about, the services and hopefully they improve, I think that you know more and more of us need to make noise about the importance of investing in mental health, investing in rehabilitation or counseling that is youth friendly as well.
Mm. Mm.
um, because we do have some, but we still the gaps are still there. Like even if you have it in Pokemon, you go out to the rural areas, that doesn't exist.
Mm.
You know.
Mm. Yeah, definitely.
Um, yeah, but one like I wanted to say, like I mentioned, one top counseling line earlier, and
Oh yeah,
maybe
yeah,
we can
that's
share
right.
this
Maybe
later
we
on.
should.
Yeah,
I
they have a
should definitely
page.
find that number.
Yes, so it's 7150
Oh,
eight triple zero. Yes.
7150
So
8000.
8000. Yeah. So please do share it. They have a page as well on Facebook, and this is part of a child fund as
Okay,
well. So
okay,
yeah. So do
very
reach out
nice.
to them if you wanna bring them on as
Yeah,
well. But
yeah.
very helpful. I used it once, and yeah, it was pretty good. So I do recommend them as well. And it's sometimes helpful because you don't have to go anywhere. You just use your phone, and I think it's digital. It's free.
Okay.
And you just you're talking to someone you don't
Well, that's
see, and
even
they
better.
don't. Yeah, and you don't have to tell them your name.
Right. Right.
Even you don't have
Kept
to tell them. You
anonymous.
can say, I
Yeah,
just want to
anonymous.
remain anonymous. Yeah, I've done that. I'll be like, the last time when I called them, I was like, can I like remain anonymous? And they said, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we do recommend this to school kids, to people, and when we go to the communities and we meet people, we tell them, this service exists. So for Port Moresby, and I think other parts of the country probably as well, but do go on the page and get more information.
So there was One Talks helpline.
Counseling, One Talk counseling helpline.
Counseling helpline. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very, very reassuring to hear that's available. So I'll definitely try to reach out to them, and also if anyone in the audience was thinking of trying to get help, there you go. There's the number 7150 8000. I hope I got that right.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. So it's good to know that that's there. And also you spoke about the family something support in the Pomgen.
Oh yeah, there's Compton has I think it's the psychiatric ward. But it's worth reaching out and finding more information about that. But I do hear they're really good as well.
I'll definitely do that. Yeah, I'll try and reach out to them.
But also these are the ones that are available to the public as well. But also if you can afford it, and you go to like private hospitals, like if you go to PIH, different hospitals would have they would have like a psychology or
someone who's you can speak to about that. Okay.
So the other thing as well is that if you can afford it, you can go to say PIH, and it would be around, I think, the PIH like 75 for like per session, 75 kina, like per hour or something. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And of course, so if you can, if you can afford it, do it. And it's not something you have to do every time, but especially if you go through a really difficult period, it's worth it. And you don't want to talk to anyone or within your circle. These are some options that you can consider.
Thank you. It's good to know that these are available to our public in public.
Yes.
So we had a few follows and likes. Thank you, Simon, for the follow. Denzel, thank you for the like. Ozzy, sorry I haven't been acknowledging your likes, but the notifications are popping up on the screen as we're chatting, and I don't want to sort of break the conversation. But if you have any questions or any comments you'd like to, just feel free to join in the discussion as well. So if you missed out the first half of the live stream, Bronwyn has gone over a few things of what she's dealt with, and also ways that Papua New Guineans can deal with issues in Port Moresby, I think, but I'm not sure about outer centers. Would they have their own places to go, do you think, or is it harder in the regional centers, do you think?
In some places, like I'm not completely well versed in it, and it's something that I've been trying to learn as well. There's another organization called Family Health Association, or FHA. They usually have like the youth clinics, so they have them also in. We work with them as well at UNFB. So they're in Ley. You'll find them in Ley as well. They're also in Port Moresby here in town, and they're also in East New Britain. So they have their clinics, the youth clinics, and you can actually get youth-friendly counseling services. This is something that I missed in the first round. But if you go on, we're all on Facebook. Go on Facebook, reach out to Family Health Association, PNG, or you can see they have a youth page as well. And you can find some of their contacts. So most of the FHAs have they have a youth clinic as well, and they do counseling. Yeah, and they can do counseling on family planning, on contraceptives, even things like that as well. Apart from these things, so I mean, it's worth reaching out as well to them. Yeah. And they're young people, so
Mhm.
They're young people. They have young volunteers. They work with young people. And so, I
Which is
think
good.
sometimes it's more
It's
easier for you to
making
talk to
it
young
more.
people,
You can
yeah, as
approach them
opposed to,
easier. Yeah.
yes, exactly. So reach out and ask about the kind of services they have. They have their clinics. They have the youth clinics as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, they operate within a clinic. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So
So that's HC Written, Lay, Port Moresby. Yeah. These
okay.
are some of the sites. They can tell you about where other sites they may be in as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And also that One Talks counseling helpline is, if you have Digicel, it's free to call. So which is very good news. So anyone around Papua New Guinea can reach them.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Um, Going back to the sort of the self awareness, and one of my questions on social media was also to do with what people do to relax and sort of relieve the stress, which I think
Yep.
helps. And I think, as you said, was praying or meditating and getting that time by yourself, really to just
Yeah.
focus on yourself. But is there anything else uh, you would suggest for young people? Like in previous discussions with my guests, we did talk about exercise and being physical and getting active as another
Yeah.
way to sort of. I think one of our viewers asked the question, "How do I deal with?" He had anxiety issues, and he was just asking, "How do I? When my meds run out, what do I do?" And I think we were like, "Yo, we're not professionals, but one of
Mm.
the ways you can do it is physical health, is you try to get your health, physical
Yeah.
health, and it helps your mental health at the same time.
Yeah.
So
I think, yeah, definitely exercise is something that helps
mm,
a lot, being healthy. And I think the other thing as well I've learned is that food can actually influence how you feel
right,
as
right,
well in your moods. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
It's
I
like
think
all
the
to do
other
with the
thing is also,
chemicals and everything in your
yes,
body.
that
Yeah,
kind of stuff. Yeah. And I can't go further into detail because I'm not a nutritionist
yeah, yeah.
or a doctor, but I have worked with different people who have suggested various things to me. But one thing that I've even noticed myself is um, you have to also be mindful of your food, and you can do this research online how food affects moods,
Mm.
even not having enough water as well and being dehydrated. These things, they contribute or they
Yeah,
add on
yeah.
as well to how you feel and how you manage stress. And also sleeping is very important.
Mm.
I know a lot of people romanticize working hard and not sleeping at night. They're
Mm.
like, oh, I'm able to be up all night. I can do like odd hours. I get only 3 hours sleep, but I can still survive. And people talk about that like level of hard work where you don't sleep
Mm.
as something that as it is something to be proud of. And something that I learned from one of my counselors was like not looking after yourself is nothing to be proud of.
Right, right. It's very
not
true.
not looking after yourself, yeah. And I remember her telling me this because I'm also someone who's guilty of working like nonstop and then not having
Mm.
enough rest or even just having time to just self-care,
Burn yourself out.
and
Mm.
yes, so sometimes burning yourself out, not having enough sleep, not having time for yourself, even if it's like just doing nothing is not, like staying at home and doing nothing is not enough self. Sometimes you just have to go and maybe you go and you do your hair or you do your nails or you play sports or you do something that you love. So if you're working, you need to find time to be able to put that aside and to do something that's not work, where you completely disconnect and you
Mm.
look after yourself. You need to be able to sleep well, you need to be able to eat well. um, and these things people don't take really seriously. But I remember when I went for when I've gone for like stress counseling or stuff like that, this is something that they say, it affects you if you don't sleep properly, if you don't look after your health as well, it also affects you.
Mm.
So because emotional health also affects your physical health, it's draining to deal and process some of these things. And if you're going through an emotionally rough period and you're not eating and drinking water and doing these things, then it does add on as well. So I think
Can definitely
sometimes
play a
being
part.
mindful of that. Yes, make like, and I'm not perfect at that either. So it's
Yeah,
something that I have to remind myself. Yeah, I have to
we're
remind
all
myself.
working on it. I know I am. So
Definitely. But I mean, this is something that to consider how your health, your physical health actually affects your emotional health as well.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I think everyone has their own way of distressing. Sometimes it's watching the sunset, sometimes it's just taking a walk.
that's it.
That
That's it.
helps.
We all have our
I think
different
also
ways,
just,
and
yes,
everyone's
and not
different.
doing things or reacting. Yeah, not reacting in the moment. Try not to react in the moment when you're just like under so much emotion. But yeah, managing it. Everyone has their thing. I like to watch comedy.
Yeah, yeah,
That's one thing that works for me. Um, I'll try exercise. I'll go out and do things like other things to kind of keep my mind a bit distracted. Like, yes, you have to deal with it, but sometimes it's also good to take a break and to
yeah,
go and to do activities that stimulate the mind, so that you're not just sitting there dealing with it or thinking about it. You're also
mm,
active and
mm,
moving around. It's also good for your self-esteem
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Do things that also improve your self-esteem as well, because that's what you really need. Like the fight
mm,
to
mm,
get out of depression, it comes from here. And if you're
yeah,
not able to fight, and sometimes we look for strength outside, from outside, but you need to find inner strength. and
right, right,
and so yeah. Or sometimes, like for me, I remember going through, like in my depression period, like one thing that helped was even just standing in front of the mirror and telling myself positive things about myself, which
right,
is not easy. Like it's that, oh, you're, like coming and looking at yourself and like you're beautiful, or looking at yourself in the mirror and telling yourself you are intelligent, you're smart, you are, a force to be reckoned with, you are a leader, you are an
yeah,
overcomer, you are a thriver. All those things, like you have to stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself that sometimes. And it's
mm,
so important, especially in those moments when it's really difficult to say it.
mm, mm,
That's when you have to say it. So sometimes, like I've even in my depression phase, like I've even had moments where I have to stand and cry and say that to myself in front of the mirror. But you have to fight it. You have to fight the negative emotions, and you have to tell yourself, because the more you speak these things about yourself, it helps
mm,
you
mm,
start living it. A lot of these things as well, it's also how you speak about yourself. And you need that
mm,
strength from inside, and you have it. It's not that you don't have it, you do. But you have to remind yourself. So that's why, even as weak as you feel, stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself everything you do not feel. So if you do
mm,
not feel strong, tell yourself you're strong.
yeah,
Tell
yeah.
yourself you are, fire.
That
You
you are the
are,
warrior within.
yes, you are the warrior within. Yes, exactly. That's why I have my page that's called Warrior Within.
Yeah,
But you have to tell yourself that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So for me, that's what really helped. Really building up your self-esteem and finding like yourself again, finding your self-love, your strength. All of that stuff is from within.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah. Which brings you back to reflection again.
Yes, yes, which is very important. And I don't think if someone hasn't taught you, or if you don't know how to do it, it's kind of something you have to find. Um,
Yeah.
and I think athletes, they kind of find that when they, like, top performing athletes, where they have to perform at a certain level, they
Yeah.
kind of find that strength where I have to push on through the barrier and
Yeah.
work through it. And
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, yes, that's true. Yeah.
mm. So
Absolutely,
even
yeah.
when I go for a walk, I will tend to still think about work in my head. So I'm trying to, it's always a battle, like a battle for me to just, focus on what I'm doing in the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm just walking on the road or walking on the street, in the park or whatever, and block out, just for a little while, half an hour or an hour, just block out the work sort of side of things and focus on the
Yeah.
moment, like being in the moment. And that took a while for me to figure out, but I definitely know it works. And it helps me a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
definitely. I
hmm,
think we all have the strength in us. We just have to believe in ourselves. then we
Yeah.
can get through it.
But that's great. All the talks that we had, Bronwyn, were very insightful, and you definitely educated me in a few things. Also about the situation in PNG, where people can go to and things like that. And I think we will probably close up the interview today. But as well, as I said before, if anyone wants to reach out to myself or Bronwyn, you can easily reach Bronwyn on her page, which I've pinned to the chat. And
Yes.
I'm sure she will also, be willing to speak to you, and if she can help as well. So on that note, Bronwyn, thank you very much for coming on the live stream.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking your time, and hopefully I wish you all the best with all that you're doing as a youth
Thank you.
ambassador. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon,
Thank
everyone,
you.
and thanks again, Bronwyn.
And thanks
Have a good
everyone.
night.
Bye.